My name is Alexander Baumgart, and I'm a design educator in California. I live in Berkeley, but I teach in San Francisco at a school called California College of the Arts, which was founded 140 years ago by German arts and crafts people that were pioneers coming to the US and founding that school around the same time as the University of California, Berkeley was founded. So I'm very proud of teaching there. I teach in the design program. My main field is interaction design, and a lot of people have said, oh, what is interaction design? Well, we teach in a way where it's really about the interaction between humans, often facilitated through the use of technology, sometimes in good and often in bad ways, and we'll talk about this a little bit today. Within the program, I'm teaching almost all things, but the things that are most dear to me and that I teach most frequently are social innovation, design strategy, so okay, why and what to design anything. And then from the craft perspective, I teach prototyping, advanced prototyping, how to use making things to inquire into the world and learn and research about it. And I teach an experience design studio course where basically the students use all their craft skills to create product service ecosystems. Oh God, what a word. But just think of like many products, digital, physical, working together, a network, and trying to provide some value to the people that are using it. So when I talk about design today, I want to go actually a level deeper, because most recently there's like one breed in the world of people that get a lot of kind of creds these days for various reasons, which are I always say the design siblings, the engineers, right? Because they create things and put them into the world, and but often being driven by like, well, look, I can create something, so I create it and put it in the world. They don't often ask why. We famously have like the Oppenheimer quote of like, oh my God, what have I done, or what have we done? And say like, well, if you would have like maybe do a little bit of human-centered research and systemic ripple effects of what you're doing, you would have known what you're doing. So nowadays, designers get a lot of credit too, and this is why I want to actually inquire a little bit into the nature of design, because I actually think we are all designers. Ooh, right? Even you journalists, you're designing something. You're humans, you create something, so you're designers. So I want to unpack this a little bit and also talk a little bit of like, once we unpack and understand what design is as part of the human condition and the ability to actually act upon the world and change it, well, what kind of responsibility stems from that realization and using our craft of making, putting things into the world, no matter if it's words or things, what it means for us and how to work with that. So, I will not give you any recipes. This is also like I'm invited to a lot of talks. It's like, okay, then there need to be actionable things. So it's like, well, the actionable thing here is that I make you think, and then you integrate whatever you learned, your insights, into your own practice. So it's also my philosophy of teaching. I don't teach the students to adopt my ideas. I teach them ways, designerly ways, of coming to grips with their own ideas, test these ideas, and then hopefully bring them as little idea babies into the world that take tangible shape. So what is design in service to? So, as I said before, what we the question that I want to ask today is, well, why design and what is design? And I already talked a little bit to this. I'm always kind of ahead of myself. And what is the context of design? What is the context that design is operating in, right? The broader context of what we are all doing. So, why design and what is design? Design's getting a lot of attention frequently. So there is, for example, Sophie mentioned design thinking. So there's now a whole branch which is called business design, because it's like, oh, we're using the ways of design to design the creative process to developing new kinds of business models. This doesn't necessarily mean like the design of products or services. it's basically about the business models and the business systems themselves in designerly ways. Design thinking is one of the most prominent concepts where non-designers use the design process as a way to think differently about like creating businesses. Then the other one is experience design, which a lot of us are familiar with, which I often refer to as the front end of innovation. You hear about user experience, customer experience. It's basically what we, at the end of the day, what we create, the experiences that users, customers, other human beings are using. And what we designers do is we create experience intent, sometimes with the help of others, sometimes on our own. And then at this point often, and maybe I already like answer a question that comes later, it's like, wait a second, isn't this like art? What's the difference between art and design? I said, like, very simple. Art doesn't have a user. Design has. It's applied art, right? We are making something that has a purpose to address a goal or need of somebody else, while art is using the same creative process to express a point of view and a perspective on the world through the artists and through the artist's artifacts. Okay, but let's start all before that. So design. So I told you, I will go all the way back. That fella, our brother or sister. So there was like, for a long time, it's like, oh, it makes us human because we are actually creating tools. That's like, it's a very unique thing that we as humans create tools to extend ourselves to actually get what we want. We have a goal, and if our physical or mental abilities kind of prevent what we want to get extremely innovative, right? So we create a tool. But then it became apparent that actually other primates are doing this too. Like this wonderful chimpanzee. You know what chimpanzee's favorite snack is? Termites. But the damn termites, they live in these stacks. So what does the chimpanzee do? It's like, First do I destroy the termite stack? Well, then they are all like dispersing and you would have to grab them with your fingers. So one chimpanzee had a very smart thought. Take a stick, break it off like a branch, stick it into the termite stack, wait a while, pull it out, and actually lick them off that stick. Like a little lollipop or some ice cream. So, design seems to be, at least for primates, kind of like a natural thing to do. So design is problem seeking and solving. And there he goes. Lovely to lick it from the stick. But there's another thing. It's also, it's incredibly social because immediately the other chimpanzees go like, that's a great idea, so I want to use that product too. So it's because I want to lick some too. So design is actually co-creative. And then by like the other chimpanzees using the sticks maybe slightly differently in a more effective way, this is how innovation works. And in some respect, this hasn't changed to this day. There's a couple of primates coming together, trying to like to work towards like some needs and goals, right? And like, yeah, they use sticky notes, they don't lick termites out of sticks, but they use sticky notes to think about making sticks to lick termites off. Or digital service that helps you to connect with other people that like to lick termites out of sticks. So what I also want to say here, I know you are laughing, and I use humor also as a way of kind of exposing my students, but also sometimes in my professional practice, executives, business executives, to kind of hard truths that actually we live in a very complex world, but the foundations this world is built on are actually quite simple. If you look at it and you have the ability to see it clearly, which we will talk about, it's an important practice as a designer. So, design integrates diverse perspectives. So I just said there were the chimpanzees and they were all looking like at seeing an innovation by a fellow primate. Today we have a high level of specialization, given our world is so complex. We bring engineers together, business strategists, ethnologists, anthropologists. Everyone comes together. And I think even in your field, I know some of you are emerging journalists, and some of you are seasoned journalists. Even in that field, you need to you do your research, you bring diverse perspectives together to actually understand a certain context and maybe write about it. And in the field of product or service, you bring these diverse perspectives together to understand the broader context and then hopefully make something that actually has a good reason for being in the world. So another thing that makes design unique as a way of inquiring into the world is that a lot of designers use the craft of drawing to find a different way to actually communicate certain aspects, especially of systemic context, how things are connected, and most importantly, even when I say systems and how things are connected, that design makes the abstract visible. So one part of the things that design does is always find an image for it. Right? If I want to convince somebody about, or not convince about somebody, but if I want to understand, for example, different mindsets, I can talk about it, but I can also try to use visual things when I come into situations where language is actually starting to be not adequate anymore. And part of innovation is also finding new language. And the creative process on finding new language for things that we cannot talk about because they are so new is an important aspect of it too. And for example, I use visualization often in complex contexts with executives to kind of get them into a new frame of mind and kind of reframe certain problems or opportunities that they are seeing. So design is iterative. So the design process runs experiments constantly. I talked about prototyping before, right? So, and you, as journalists, writers, you write drafts, right? And then you write another draft, and you write another draft, and you write another draft. As designers, we have prototypes, either conceptual prototypes, or that eventually become actually tangible prototypes that we can put into the world. Let's say I want to make a pair of glasses that lets me see augmented reality through having certain visual data visualized in my glasses while I'm looking at the world. I'm bringing this up because it's kind of a trendy topic these days, and I have to deal with it a lot. So, well, first maybe I have a conceptual idea of it, and I draw a conceptual visual model of that. I make a hypothesis, and then I create a very low fidelity prototype. Maybe I stick some weird gear and a little camera looking like a cyborg in front of my actual glasses, and then I go out in the world and I test this. And if I see some traction, I learn some things, so I change either the conceptual model or design, and then I do it again and again and again. So while you are writing draft 1, 2, 3, and 4, and ultimately you will have something that you ship, we make these things and we call it iteration 1, 2, 4. Actually, the first one I always call 0. That would be the weird, like me sticking something on here. So, iterative, very important thing. So, design makes it possible, tangible. That's the other thing. Business geniuses have fantastic ideas, and they can even write it down. Sometimes they can even draw a crappy picture about it, of it, but they cannot bring it into the world, right? They need people that can manufacture the product. And before you manufacture a product, you have to think it up. When you think it up, you use the way of design to inquire into the world by making prototypes. You make tangible things. Only designers can do that. Right? Artists can do it too, but they are not interested. They make their artifacts to express something. So, and as you see here, this is like my daily work. Like actually, when I came here a day before, I was still teaching advanced prototyping and infusing basically prototypical ideas with with technology as a material to test these things out, and then actually produce also data and learn from that. So so there is designability. And we just learned designability is innate to every primate, which means we are all designers, yes, as primates. But then there's a bunch of primates which call themselves designer, which use the designability that every human being has in a professional way. Okay, so that's a quick recap, right? Like designers can integrate diverse knowledge. They can see whole systems. Okay, I don't want to go too much into the whole systems thinking aspect, which is a very important aspect of my work, from a technical, but also from a social and from a philosophical perspective. Because once you start kind of thinking about like, wait a second, I basically have an idea that there is of a thing that is not existing in the world today, then I create a couple of prototypes, and at the end of the day, millions of little things made out of atoms are shipped in the world, right? I need resources for that, I need to build factories, I act upon the world I'm doing this in. This must have consequences, and suddenly you start thinking about this, and a lot of us these days are very conscious about it. Some of us are overwhelmed, but I think, or actually I know, having done it, is that designers are slowly learning that they are an important connective tissue in all of this, because they are touching upon the entire life cycle of a product or a service, and given their abilities that they can see these things because they work with those things, they can use the designerly ways of seeing, knowing, and actually making it tangible, for example, for visualization, to help others to understand those implications much better. And doing this by making the abstract visible and making the possible tangible. So, because you can talk a lot about like what kind of, let's say, like environmental impact a certain thing has, you can draw pictures about it, but if you try it out, kind of in more or less like a secure environment, you learn much more about it. Okay, so may I God, this is all very abstract. But let's talk about the context of design very quickly. Here it gets a little bit like I didn't have to condense a lot of things. And I talk with my students, we talk about philosophy and metaphysical stuff and esoteric stuff quite a bit, because once you have the time to think deeper about what you are doing in the world, you feel like, oh my God, like I'm part of this big connected system, and what I'm doing has effects of everything else. I'm kind of the butterfly waving my wings and starting a hurricane somewhere else. Yes, you do, we all do, but fear not. It is complex, but it can be mastered. We are humans. We are creating havoc, but we also I believe I know we are also the answer to it. So there's the natural world, and within that natural world that our senses can perceive, lives the wonderful human being that perceives its environment, and has all these fantastic desires that you can look at from like a very scientific, anthropological, or biological, or psychological perspective, or you can look at it from a spiritual or metaphysical or esoteric perspective. And the truth is, all of it comes together, and I call it a human operating system, and one of the most important things that we as designers do is trying to understand that. Okay, don't get me started. So, within that natural world, there's in other words, the human-made world, right? Which has a huge impact on the natural world. And then sometimes I say like, well, and then there's the black void, which is the metaphysical world that is there, but we rarely touch it these days, unfortunately. So, whoa, okay, so you're saying I'm a human, and I have like I'm making, no matter if I'm a designer or not, I'm a journalist. I now know I'm a journalist and I am a designer because I'm a primate that writes things, puts it into the world, and has an effect on the world. Hallelujah. Okay, that's not as worse as like those designers that make things that are later trash and kind of pollute the world. I'm just potentially polluting the mind of my readers with bad writing. So the thing is to understand what technology, and I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, there's social media, fine. We all like to connect with each other. It's a technology that has been like created by a sociopath to prevent talking directly to people, and it works very well. The technology is not a problem. I think we can connect meaningful through this technology, and it will iterate itself towards that. For external pressure, policymakers saying, "Look, what's going on there?" I honestly don't know. Wait a second, it's a system you created. But I'm an optimist, we'll iterate ourselves there. But one thing to understand what's going on in the world is to understand the goals of the leaders of a domain. And so what is actually technology's vision today? These two guys are very, very well respected. Everyone knows them, right? Some people hate them, some people love them, right? Mr. Bezos, Amazon, most valuable company in the world, right? And Elon Musk, not the most valuable company in the world, but the most promising, and two visionary leaders, both in their own respect. So what is the goal of these two gentlemen? Take a wild guess. You can speak German if you like. No, not for this one. We do this for the questions. But for now, just say, what do you think is the ultimate goal of these two people?
To make money.
No, there's one goal. It's not the primary. I don't think it's the primary goal.
To fill up the day.
To fill up the day?
Yes, not to get bored. They are so bored, they need something
Yes,
to fill up their day.
all of that. But there's some tangible goal that they both are very, deliberate.
They both want to colonize Mars.
Yes. No, but I phrase this differently. I say they want to leave the planet. Because they know they want to colonize the planet to make more money. But there's also one thing is they have already they are done with this planet. Because these are like some of the most visionary kind of capitalists out there. And by the way, I'm pro-capitalism, but I don't like greedy capitalists that have given up on their context that they're operating in. Oh shit, I messed up this world. There are other worlds, and with technology we can get there and start all over again. So, very important aspect. Keep that in mind when you think about it. And you read all these other things about what they do, but they always say what they actually want to take, all the money that they're making on this planet, what they want to do with it is to colonize the next planet. So technology sucks, right? No, because it depends on the intended use. This means if we are intentional, I think those two guys are intentional. They know exactly what they are doing. I don't want to impose any ethical or moral judgment on that. I just want to say we all need to ask ourselves the question of, well, am I intentional in the context I'm operating in? Within myself, my family, my community, my country, right? The planet. And designers have, again, due to the nature of what we are doing, an important responsibility in it from a professional sense, and I think as humans, since we are all designers, acting upon the world and changing it constantly through our actions, we have that too. So so there are a couple of trends, right? There's decentralization, which is this huge trend, the blockchain, cryptocurrencies. All of this those are just the surface of technology changes. And they are all very interesting, but they are not critical to how we as humanity are basically progressing forward. Technology changes always quickly, humans don't. They change very, very slowly. Most of us are run on our amygdala, our firmware, and not on the prefrontal cortex, which I always refer to as artificial intelligence 1.0. And now we are creating a second one, which we externalize. It's fantastic. Why don't we just master what we have at first? Machine learning, I only call it machine learning. I'm sorry, AI is just a trend word for massive machine learning. Just much more large scale because we have faster computing. But sentient machines, I'm working actually with my students on creating kind of fake sentient machines. And it works pretty well because the human operating system is actually very easily fooled in thinking it's talking to a sentient system. So Not anytime soon. So, okay. So design's challenge is then, how do we embrace this kind of complexity on one side, or are we, what a lot of other people do, to kind of come to grips with kind of all the negative impact that we have on our environment, of other contexts we are operating in, is, are we amplifying elementalism? With it's not that's not just pure simplification, right? This is like what happened in the Weimar Republic. It's like, okay, you know what, we think in more basic ways about this, and boops, the world seems to be so much easier again, and we don't have to integrate all the things that we actually don't want to integrate when we are looking at the world. So once you are understanding the world as a system, once you understand the human role and the role of it as a designer acting upon the world, you cannot go back. And so for me, becoming this older guy, a designer, educator, is like, damn it, so what are we doing? So this is from the late 60s. This is the way design schools were like thinking about like their own mission then. And I would still say anyone who has like a creative practice, and a journalist has a creative practice too, I'm sorry. This is something that's inspiring to say, like, if the designer is to make a deliberate contribution to society, must be able to integrate all he can learn about behavior and resources, ecology and human needs. And I think that gets for every human being that kind of tries to make an imprint on other human beings. And I think that goes also for journalists. So, okay, how do I start living up to this responsibility? Very simple, always start with the human in the mirror. I know it's a Michael Jackson quote, and in America this is now not entirely politically correct anymore to use this, since all this horrible stuff about came out, but I still love it because it's true. You need to start with yourself, and you can use these designerly ways of understanding your context. So, this gentleman, Buckminster Fuller, I don't know how familiar you are with him. He is a famous architect from the 60s. You see the structure, he created these wonderful structures made of like rigid and flexible triangles. You have probably seen his domes. And he has been also an avid environmentalist. He has been like one of the forefathers of like thinking systemically about like what you do in the world. He wrote a couple of amazing books. I Seem to Be a Verb is one of my favorites. He also coined the term that you might have heard, spaceship Earth. That we are actually all living on a spaceship. We are actually the crew of a spaceship, but we have forgot about it. Right? And we can only steer this, use this spaceship if we all work together. I love that. So, and for me, another way is I also, since I'm not a native English speaker, I think very hard about the meaning of language. Sometimes even in class, I use German language and no, I don't give an example on it, but I use German language and I explain to them how that German word conveys something where there is no English word for it, right? And what I liked about this, when I struggled with like what my responsibility as a designer is, or what I am actually as a human being in the world, what the hell am I came upon this, reading about this guy who has like his entire life thought about this and acted upon the world in very positive ways. Here's what he found. So he takes it a step further from I think, therefore I am. He was like, well, yes, but I live on Earth at present, so there's a context that's broader than myself, right? I don't know what I am. I know that I am not a category. I am not a thing, a noun. So I seem to be a verb. Ein Tu-Wort. Der Mensch ist das Tu-Wort in der Welt. Ja? Und als Designer bin ich das professionelle Tu-Wort. Oh mein Gott! I am an evolutionary process. See, I spoke one German sentence and I cannot speak English anymore.
Yeah.
I am an integral function of the universe. I get shivers from this, and when you get shivers, you always know you're hearing some truth. So there are also shivers where it's the opposite. But like you need to learn working with those shivers. With the ones that like, so of course this is always in America I make the joke, oh God, when a German says, I'm an evolutionary process, an integral function in the universe, that sounds like vision of grandiosity, but no, it's not. I think it's actually a very humble thing to take on the responsibility of like, I am in this world, right, and I am acting upon the world constantly. I am the two-word. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? And what should I actually do? So, okay. So the big question that arises from this is, what am I in service to? So because it's not what design is in service to, because design is just the expression of like a bunch of people identifying themselves as like professional humans that professionally use their design ability to act upon the world. And they say like, well, okay, so you are aware of you're doing this intentionally. What is your intention? Making money? Paying the rent? Well, I think it's a serious question that everyone should ask themselves. And I do a lot of workshops with people trying themselves to ask the question, and there is anger, tears, anxiety, excitement. I see a lot of things in service to. Wait a second, isn't proper English in service of? Yes, it is. But when you read certain scripture, mostly religious text, there is a term of in service to, and there's a different. You know, like that, like in German, we have this like frei von etwas sein und frei zu etwas zu tun. Yes, exactly. So it's the directionality. If I'm in service of, I'm in service of God, the deity, the entity. I'm in service of the man, of the corporation, of the school, of this, of that. You might be, it's good when you realize this, but what are you in service to? What's your goal? What is the imprint that you want to make as the two-word in your life? And what are you doing? Was ist dein Tun? I'm writing. I'm seeing, and I'm writing objectively. So I like this statement, and I teach it to people, invite them to use it and try it out. It's like, because it is energy directed towards an actionable goal. Tun, handeln. And I was so happy when you when you listen to Greta Thunberg, and not the famous like Rand speech, but whenever she's interviewed, she talks about making. That she wants to inspire people to make things, to act in the world, not to like be aware of something and think about it. She always deliberately says, this is pretty amazing actually when you look at it, to take action. And the focus of like people on the spectrum of Asperger's syndrome, they have that. This is why a lot of engineers rule the world, because they have it. Right? Like that famous one that created a social network, so that like one of the kind of negative sides or not so social sides of Asperger's is, I don't want to talk directly to people. But there we go. Oh man, fine, okay, good. So intentional action to impact, boom. So this is actually the mission statement of Buckminster Fuller, which I rewrote, like that first line I put into the front, but it's very powerful. And he lived his life by it. Like, being in service to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest time possible through spontaneous cooperation with without ecological damage or disadvantage to anyone. What a big mission. He could never achieve it, but he achieved a lot within it. So like, it's a little bit like, I don't know who's in tech here, there's this kind of like metric framework, it's called OKRs, objectives, key results. And the objective that you put yourself is always bigger than you can possibly achieve. Otherwise, you are not pulled forward and motivated enough, right? If you can meet like 70% of like your goal, you're good, right? If you meet 100%, goal was not big and ambitious enough. So, when you use this framework, and here's this like from one of the workshops, very weird speech acts come out of it. And I wanted to just give you one example of like that one that always stayed with me, because it was this young designer lady in this workshop, a lot of tears, realizing, you know, tension between her work ecosystem, her family ecosystem, but coming kind of grips to that and kind of finding this purpose, her purpose and mission statement using this framework. And she wrote the following thing. It's because once you have your own in-service to statement, you can kind of extract, once you be able to see clearly, you can extract what the mission statement of others are, and you can combine it. So, and once that gels, and you read a statement for yourself, it's a little bit like, again, you feel the energy, you feel if it's true or if you're not only making up a superficial thing. So at the end, she had this, I am in service to empowering women who empower women. And we were like, oh, like, I get it again. It's like, whoa, it sounds a little awkward, but when you say it, but it's extremely powerful. It holds energy, it holds truth. So 3 months later, she quit her job at a bank and started a foundation doing exactly that. So this is basically using the design process, right, upon something that is not a product or a service. It's just, you know, in some ways, like, that was the promise of design thinking, to use the designerly ways of inquiring and acting in the world, to actually use it to inquire in yourself and your own practice, and how to use the creative process in the world. 4 principles: be present, see clearly, seek tension. Yes, that's very hard for Germans. They always seek the destructive tension. You can, like, if you work with, like, if there is, you know, seek constructive tension, you learn how to see this, that's the way to go forward. This is like how also in social systems you have the biggest opportunity to make some meaningful change. And that ultimately leads to you always be intentional. Always be intentional. When you go to India, to the mountain, and you meet the guru will always say in one or the other word is, be truthful and love everyone. Right? That's what they all say in one or the other word. So, and the first thing to it is you do it with yourself. You learn to do that with yourself. Because it's all about this. Wait a second, he was talking about design. Yeah, design. Design is the action force in the world that changes our world. First, the human world, which is part of the natural world, which will ultimately change us. Because again, the whole, like, we already have like an AI 1.0 in here that helps us to not act upon our firmware, which is just like, I want that guy's money, I want that guy's wife or husband, or I want to do this, I want to do that, and then, you know. So now we are building something, and soon we extend ourselves with like having like a man-made second level frontal cortex that is also connected on a platform made by Mark Zuckerberg. No, I'm just kidding. But it could be, it hopefully won't be. So we need to be intentional, we need to understand our role. So, and how do we start to practice these principles? Always by grounding ourselves. And if I wouldn't have spoken so much, I would actually do an exercise with you now, but I won't. You still want me to do it? No, but then I don't have time. Or maybe, here's the thing. We first do questions, and if there are only 1 or 2 questions and we still have time, it takes about 5 minutes to do the exercise. But, yeah? Okay, the exercise is very, well, so I always do this because then he's like, okay, there is actually one tangible recipe that I have, and it's not what you expect. It's this particular exercise that I do. I've now decided to do it. I must look here. Here's the dirty secret. When somebody calls me and invites me to give a talk, when we look this up, you will notice this. I say always, no, I don't want to give a talk, I want to do a workshop. I'll do a workshop for free at your conference, but I will not be another talking head that just tells things. I want to teach people tangible things that they can use for themselves. I don't want to teach them recipes, I want to teach them practices so that they can actually work within their context. And then most people say yes, okay. So in this case, that was the format for it, but I still came. So you can again, you can thank Sophia and Lavinia to make this happen, because I was like, okay. Because I don't like to be the talking head as much anymore, because there are too many talking heads out there. So this exercise is, I'm from the West Coast. Some people would call it a mindfulness exercise, but it's a very particular one. And I think it would be of benefit doing it now, because it's always good to do it. I do it in front of every workshop that I do, even with like bigwig tech executives in the Silicon Valley, and they first always go like, who's that guy? Then we do the mindfulness exercise, and then they go like, who's that guy? So, shall we try it?
Yes.
Okay, so I need a chair for it. You already have chairs. And, thank you. And of course, God. I don't want to be blinded. I want to come closer to you. It's weird. Okay, here we are. Okay, so the exercise. Let me first do this, and maybe I actually should go a little bit to the side. Sorry to the camera people. Because you see this like little dot appearing there. So I first started doing this a couple of years ago at a German conference, and when I was like, they would all kind of flee the room. And then I said, you know what, for people, will ask you to close your eyes and do a couple of things in a second. But I always say, if you are uncomfortable for whatever reason to close your eyes, you can, worry not, look at that dot. Because you need to focus on your inside. And if you can't, doing this by closing your eyes, for whatever reason, it's helpful to fixate a point in a space, right? Like a crack in a wall, or this dot on a like ginormous presentation screen. So, but I think that it's the most effective if you close your eyes. Okay, so everyone is sitting. Please close your eyes. So make yourself comfortable on your chair. Put your hands, your left hand on your left knee, the right hand on your right. Sit comfortable. Sit straight. Straight. Think of it like as if somebody's pulling up your head. You have a little string on the top of your head. Somebody's pulling it up slightly. You are doing this too. So you feel like how your back is stretching slightly. You're sitting straight. I want you to take a couple of breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. Sophie wins. That was the deepest exhale. Stay in the breath just for a second. Okay. So I don't want you to relax too much, so I will ask you to do something. I want you to move your body to the edge of your chair as far as possible. So that your buttocks are on the edge of the chair. So find a spot so that your chair is not tipping over to the front and you're landing on the floor. But feel like you're, as if you're almost there. So that like if you're not keeping kind of like a stable structure at that edge of the seat, at the edge there, you might be falling. So you need to put some attention in there. So this is a little bit, your body should be, you're doing it right, if the body's a little bit under tension, you're still sitting straight, you're having your hands on your knees, you're pulling up. And once you feel you're sitting safe, but not too safe, still feeling the tension on the edge of the chair, and you focus on the breath again. energy in your breath is shooting out of your body, and you're breathing that energy into the floor of this room. And when you are breathing in again, you're pulling it out of the floor again. It's like, imagine like a circle that you're building with your breath into the floor. And then you're breathing it in again. You see there's a cycle between you and the floor. Okay, well, the next cycle I want you to go deeper. I want you to go into the ground below this building. Visualize it. Maybe there is infrastructure, plumbing. You're going through the bunker, and you're breathing it back in. It's okay. I can see you're doing well. Can you feel that? Now with the next one, I want you to go envision that you're going into the neighborhood. Entire neighborhood. Okay, next level is Bucharest. Imagine it. Visualize it as much as you can. Next one is Romania. Next one is Europe. The next one already our continent. And we can take this further. We can leave the planet with this. I told you so. Okay, stay out there. Out there. And look at this planet. That's your home. And with that realization, we are breathing ourselves back to the planet, to the continent, Europe, Romania, Bucharest, the Goethe Institute premises, into this building, back into the room. You're still breathing in and out, your energy out, energy in. Maybe by now you're realizing that the energy you're actually breathing in is not the same energy you're breathing out, because you're drawing from all the energy that all of you creating together. That all of us are creating together, if we want or not. There's not infinite energy out there. There's only a finite amount of energy that never changes. So before we come back fully to this room, I want you to do one more thing. The next breathing in and out, before we went kind of like vertically, right, into the ground and then vertically out of the ground again. I want you now to go horizontal in this room. What do I mean by that? I want you to keep your eyes closed, envision the people around you. And maybe you cannot exactly remember who's actually sitting next to you, or who that is, or if you know them or not, it doesn't matter. Either sense somebody sitting next to you, or envision somebody you know in the room. And with the next breath out, you are breathing right into them. And when you're breathing in, you're closing circles again. And with the next one, you're breathing into another person in the room. Helps me to move my head a little bit, to give a directionality. You don't have to do that. I feel it. It's the same shiver as for me, as when I read the Buckminster Fuller quote about I am the integral function of the universe. Okay. 2 more breaths, in and out, and then slowly close your eyes and open your eyes again. Come back to this room. The screen is frozen. Well, welcome back and thank you for being present. Here we are. Well, and that was it. Thank you, don't be a stranger. Tweet about it. Send me an email. Do you have any questions? Maybe not what you expected, but I hope it has provided some provocation or some kind of value to you. Okay. Anything goes. Don't be afraid. This is a safe space. There are no stupid questions.
Thank you very much. It was really a wonderful presentation. I am curious, why did you choose Buckminster Fuller only for his word or for his achievements in chemistry? Because actually he discovered the fullerene, and,
Yes.
and fullerene is a carbon nanostructure which is not very friendly actually, or is not considered very friendly.
Thank you for saying this. There's there's nobody amongst us without flaw, right? And I think partially having done these things, and like a lot of things we just realize, right? Like through our path in life. And I mean, let's also not forget. Often we find like, oh, look at these, look at certain billionaires like Bill Gates and what he's doing, and I think he's doing a lot of good things. But a lot of these people, and I think that's actually not a negative thing, is there's a sense of redemption, there's a sense of I'm getting older, I'm seeing more clearly, I'm realizing things, and it changes my purview and view on life. And it also inspires me to actually seek self-reflection. And then, especially if you're a scientist, right, or a designer, how to put this into action in the world. And I think he's a fantastic case for that. So he was a flawed man in many other ways as well. I mean, there are like 10 hours of his life's knowledge as recorded as videos online on YouTube. If you want to drink a heavy glass of wine and indulge yourself for a weekend, you'll also see some flaws in his thinking. But that doesn't take away from that in some, I think he's one of the most, like for me, is one of the most inspiring kind of hybrids of kind of being an scientist, engineer, architect, designer, philosopher, kind of like, I love polymaths. We should all be polymaths. I like to be in the world. But I mean, thank you for that question. I hope it answers it. So it's like a long question. More questions?
So first of all, I'd like to say that it was a really inspiring presentation, and it's a lot of food for thought. And I really like your philosophical approach. You don't really see this kind of interdisciplinarity around here, so it's very refreshing to see that. So I was curious if you could give us an example of a personal or professional big challenge and how you used all these concepts of design thinking into overcoming that challenge. Thank you.
Oh God, there are many examples. One that doesn't take too much time. So if you read like my short biographic note in the program, which normally nobody ever does, there's one project which actually was kind of a moment for me where I had this, before that, only after that project I started to think about design and the practice of it the way I am presenting it today and also how I teach it. And it was a project where I worked for a for-profit social impact enterprise, doing small-scale solar energy and lighting solutions in the emerging markets, right? And when we say emerging markets, I actually like to call it the majority markets, because those are much more people than the Western world. I had to basically for the first time visit these markets, and I had to experience people using our product ideas that we had and what we thought would help them to live a more healthy and a more meaningful life on many different levels. And what I learned was that everything that I knew was shattered because it concerned entirely kind of the convoluted context of the Western world in a broader sense. So which was kind of for me this God, what's the English word for it? I almost had like, I had a crisis of faith, right? Because before I had this foundational thinking about what design is. Also like that the designer, in some respect, even the way I talk about it, some people it's like, okay, so designers are godlike creatures that like terraform the world. And said, no, we are humble servants of the universe once we realize what our power is. So the project entitled, so I had to overhaul like an entire product line of physical products for these market contexts, building an entirely new team for it, because the company was stuck. They couldn't develop it further because internal political things, humans coming together, social system. So I had to find new ways to kind of come to grips of what the situation of the company is, using the designerly ways of visualization, the systemic context, but also using unusual ways. In the West Coast, people are more open to that, fortunately. Yes, I made myself short, but like using this with the executives, but the biggest thing was to kind of establish a way of kind of being constantly, almost every 6 weeks, being in India, being in Africa, being in China, being in rural areas with the people that would actually use the product, live there with them, sometimes also, of course, often leave them alone, being completely exposed to their context, also all the contexts that, like, for some of us from the Western world, are extremely hard on our mental and physical system. So, like, I mean, I've been in areas where I like the people that brought me, they're like, they don't see a lot of people like you, right? This is very different. So, and again, what that taught me is that, like, using these ways in those contexts and being deliberate about using designerly ways also amongst circles that are not normally not exposed to it in the West, in our world, non-design context, business people, engineers, and in the actual user or customer context, with them being there, showing empathy, using actually more ethnographic or anthropological research methods of just being with people, being in their world, opened my eyes to it, and I completely eradicated, like, kind of erased everything I learned, or most of what I learned about, like, how to understand people in a professional way, how to try to market things to people, how to, like, these days I say, like, maybe it's another insight which I should add here, is interpretation versus persuasion. We persuade each other of things we don't need, right? So we should interpret our work more closely. When you do this in India or Africa, you learn there's no other way. You cannot persuade anyone there of anything, only through interpretation, which actually for writing is quite a thing. Write an interpretive speech act versus a persuasive one. Much harder. Thank you. Sorry, it took a long